If you've ever browsed the thousands of fly patterns online or at your local shop and thought, where do I even start? This video is for you. We're breaking down flies from their absolute basics, what they are and what they imitate, all the way up to next level fly selection, matching the hatch, and advanced strategies that will help you put more fish in the net. By the end, you'll not only understand flies, but know exactly which ones to use, when to use them, and how to build out the perfect fly box. These are the same strategies that I use and that we've taught to thousands of other anglers, helping them level up their skills. This is the complete guide to fly fishing flies. Today, we're going to cover everything fly fishing flies. We're going to go from the 101 level basics to the 301 level advanced strategies and tactics. Let's start with a solid foundation and work our way up. What is a fly? A fly is an artificial lure, typically hand-tied with feathers, fur, thread, and other materials on a hook. They're designed to imitate insects or other aquatic prey that fish naturally eat. Essentially, it's the bait used in fly fishing meant to look like a naturally occurring food source to the fish. So what are those natural food sources that fish eat? For most freshwater fish, especially trout, the bulk of their diet comes from aquatic insects. These insects spend their life in and around the water, making them an easy and reliable food source. If you've ever heard of mayflies or caddis or midges or stoneflies, these are aquatic insects. Fish will also eat terrestrial insects. These are land-based bugs that get blown or fall into the river. Grasshoppers, ants, cicadas, and beetles fit into this category. As fish get bigger, they'll continue to eat aquatic insects, but they'll start seeking out larger food sources as well. Things like smaller fish, leeches, and even crayfish are on the menu. It's also worth mentioning a few other potential food sources that are related to fly fishing. Scuds and sow-bugs, worms or annelids, and fish eggs are commonly consumed by fish. For now at our 101 level, you just need to recognize that there is food available to fish throughout the entire water column, top to bottom. Our job as the fly angler is to imitate these food sources with our flies, and there are 3 types of flies we use to do just that. These are categorized by their function and where they're fished in the water column. Dries float on the water's surface, imitating adult aquatic insects and terrestrials. These are best used when fish are rising to feed on the surface. Nymphs drift below the surface, imitating immature aquatic insects, scuds, sow-bugs, worms, or eggs. These represent the majority of a trout's diet. Streamers imitate bait fish, leeches, and larger prey like crayfish. These are usually fished actively with retrieves and swings, giving them lifelike movement. And in honor of us still being at the 101 level, I thought it might be helpful if I shared a few of my favorite fly patterns. These are going to help anyone that's just getting started building out their fly boxes. For dry flies, we've got the parachute Adams. This is one of the most versatile and effective dry flies in existence. It's primarily used to imitate mayflies, but can also be used as midges or small caddis. This makes it a fantastic all-purpose dry fly. I also love the elk-hair caddis. This is used to imitate adult caddis flies, which is a major food source in trout rivers and streams worldwide. They float high and dry on the water, and fish love them. Our last fly is the chubby Chernobyl, which might just be the greatest fly ever created. It's an effective stonefly or terrestrial imitation and is nearly unsinkable. This is my go-to fly when fishing dry dropper rigs. For nymphs, there are 3 classics that stand out. First is the pheasant tail. Its iconic shape makes it extremely versatile. In smaller sizes, it can imitate mayflies, and in larger sizes, it can pass as a stonefly. Definitely belongs in your box. Next, we've got the hare's ear. This fly can imitate mayfly nymphs, caddis larvae, small stoneflies, and scuds or sow-bugs. Its buggy appearance makes it look like many different food sources, which is why fish are so willing to eat it. Our last nymph is the zebra midge. Because midges are active year-round, the zebra midge is a go-to pattern all year long. I've caught fish on this fly in the dead of winter and in the middle of summer. It just gets the job done. For streamers, there's one classic fly that stands out above the rest, and that is the woolly bugger. It's used to imitate multiple food sources like bait fish, leeches, crayfish, and even larger nymphs, and is a great searching pattern when you're not sure what fish are feeding on. So if I was just starting out my fly collection, those are the patterns that I would start with first. And if you want to save some time looking for flies one by one, you've definitely got to check out our fly collections. We've tried to make it super easy, one pack, and you're ready to hit the water. I'll throw a couple links below this video if you're interested. But as you start to build out your fly collection and interact with others out on the river, you're going to start to wonder, why do anglers carry so many different flies? And with a great question like that, you're ready to graduate and move on to the next level, Flies 201. Anglers carry so many different flies, myself included, because a fish's diet is constantly changing. Having a good variety of patterns increases your chances of having the right fly at the right time. Here's why fly boxes are packed with hundreds, sometimes even thousands of different flies. Number one is we've got seasonality and bug trends. Now, we covered the details on this in a previous video, but here's the quick version. Different insects hatch at different times of the year, meaning flies that work in the spring might not be as effective in the fall. For example, in the spring, you'll need a bunch of mayfly and stonefly patterns. In the summer, caddis and terrestrials are out and about. And in the winter, midges, scuds, and worms are on the menu. Carrying flies that match each season's primary food sources ensures you're ready no matter when you fish. Now moving on to number 2, insect stages. Most aquatic insects go through multiple life stages, and trout may prefer one stage over another depending on a number of factors like insect activity, time of year, and changing water temps or conditions. Here we have the general aquatic insect life cycle. They begin as baby bugs living under rocks and other debris at the bottom of the river. Once they've grown up and are ready to take on the world, they make their way to the surface, a stage referred to as emergers, and hatch into adults. They fly around a bit, mate, make their way back to the water to lay eggs, then die. And the circle of life continues. So here we've got 4 distinct stages: nymph, emerger, adult dun, and adult spinner. Depending on the day or even time of day, fish can become keyed in on a specific stage. And because of that, not only do I have flies in my boxes that imitate mayflies, but I also have flies that imitate each stage of a mayfly's life cycle. Nymphs, emergers, and a bunch of different dries. And now we can move on to number 3, attractor patterns. Based off seasonality and insect stages, which we just covered, it's pretty clear we need to match the hatch with certain flies in our box. So if we find some stonefly nymphs under rocks and adults crawling around in the bushes, we can match each of those to a fly out of our box. But what if we're out on the water and it's dead? No bugs flying around, no signs of life in the river, the water's too deep and not clear enough to see any fish. This is a great time to prospect for some fish and break out the attractor patterns. These flies are designed to trigger a reaction from fish using flashy, colorful, or attention-grabbing features. Examples are hippie stomper, which is purple in color, the size of a beetle or grasshopper, uses hackle like other common dry flies, and rubber legs that wiggle and can elicit a strike. Or a rainbow warrior, which is multicolored, super flashy in the water, but is the same size and shape as other mayfly or midge imitations. And so in this situation, when there's not really much happening on the river, I'll tie on a couple of attractor patterns and see if there's a fish that's willing to bite. Now, the last thing I want from this conversation is for you to feel completely overwhelmed and like you need every single fly that's out there. Yes, having a diverse fly collection, it's going to help you adapt and catch more fish. But a well-stocked fly box isn't about carrying every fly, it's about having the right fly for the situation. I would recommend building out a strong base of flies that you use on a regular basis and add specialty patterns as you go. Now that we understand the reasoning behind building out our fly collections, we're ready to move on to our level 301 material. Here we're going to answer 3 advanced fly related questions that we get asked all the time here at VFC. And number 1 is, should I buy flies or tie my own? This ultimately depends on your preferences, your skill level, and the time you're willing to invest. Here are some pros and cons to help you decide which option is best for you. First, let's talk about buying flies. Tying your own flies, it takes time and patience, especially when you're just starting. If you're eager to get on the water, buying pre-tied flies allows you to start fishing right away. Also, when you buy flies from a reputable source, this ensures that they're tied to a high standard and look realistic. If you're not yet confident in your tying abilities, this is probably going to be the most reliable option for now. And then if you're traveling or in the middle of a busy season of life, buying flies is the easiest way to get what you need quickly. There's no need to carry a fly tying kit or hunt for specific materials. Now let's talk about tying your own flies. While it's a bigger upfront investment to buy materials and tools, tying your own flies can save you money over time. A small investment in materials can allow you to tie a couple dozen flies compared to the cost of buying them individually. And when you tie your own flies, you have the freedom to experiment with different materials, colors, and sizes to match exactly what you want or need. Honestly, this is my favorite part about fly tying. I think it's pretty fun to use your creativity, and I get to make my flies the way I want them. Tying your own flies also helps you learn more about the insects fish are eating and gives you a deeper understanding of fly design. Once you get the hang of it, you'll gain a lot of satisfaction from catching fish with flies that you've created yourself. Another pro is that tying allows you to create flies that are tailored to your local fishing conditions. So you can customize patterns to match a specific hatch or imitate local species that might not be commercially available. And another reason that you might want to start tying your own flies is you get to be a part of the bigger fly tying community. It's going to open up opportunities to learn from others, exchange patterns, and share your work. I see this happen a ton inside of our school group. It can definitely be a fun hobby to share with friends or other anglers. Whether you decide to tie or buy your own flies, there's no right or wrong way to fill up your box. It just comes down to personal preference, and you can certainly do both. Moving on to number 2, a lot of anglers get tripped up with all the different fly styles that are out there. As it relates to dry flies, there's a ton of confusion around standard versus parachute versus cripple versus emerger patterns. Standard or catskill dry flies are tied with hackle around the body. Parachute flies are tied with hackle around a parachute post. Crippled dry flies imitate adults that have failed to fully emerge. They might have broken or distorted wings. And emergers, as the name suggests, are tied to imitate emerging insects rising to the surface. And so the key to understanding these different fly styles is paying attention to how they sit on the water. Your standard dry fly sits the highest on the water. These are great during an active hatch when adults are flying away. Your parachute, it sits a little bit lower, but is still on the surface. It's easier to see in faster moving water and is a very natural bug profile. Your cripples, they're going to have some parts of the fly on top and others in the surface film. These often stand out to fish because they're an easy meal ticket that can't get away. And your emergers, they're going to sit in the surface film or just under the water's surface. These are great to use at the front end of a hatch. But the confusion isn't just around dry flies. We've also got to talk about nymphs. Some nymphs have a bead and some don't. And this all depends on where you want your flies in the strike zone. If fish are closer to the bottom snacking on nymphs in faster water, you're going to need a faster sinking beadhead nymph to get it down. If fish are higher in the water column snacking on emergers, that would be a good time to use a nymph without a bead. And what about jig or euro versus standard nymphs? Standard nymphs typically have a straight vertical hook shank and are tied with or without a bead or weighted wire. The weight is concentrated throughout the body, allowing the fly to drift relatively horizontal. Jig or euro style nymphs are tied on a jig style hook and use a tungsten bead. With the jig hook and weight concentrated in the front, these ride hook point up in the water. There are times when you might opt for specifically using a jig or euro style nymph, and it's in very fast or deep water when you need to get your flies to the bottom quickly or when tightline nymphing. And you might opt for a standard nymph if you don't want it to sink quite as fast or you want more action on your flies in the water. Both styles are a tool that you can use to get your flies down into the strike zone. And another type that we get asked about all the time is wet flies. Wet flies are a type of fly designed to sink below the surface like a nymph, but are fished on the swing instead of dead drifted. And Spencer just did an entire podcast episode about wet flies, what they are, how to fish them. If you're interested in that, I'll throw a link below this video. Okay, you're about ready to graduate from VFC's Fly Fishing Fly University. We are quickly approaching the final question, which is one we get all the time. What is the best way to organize your fly box? The short answer? However you want. But if you want to see a few different options and how me, Spencer, and other anglers in our community organize their boxes, that's what we're going to cover in the next video. Check it out right here.